Hello folks, here I am back for episode 2 of It's My 2 Bits Worth TV, and as I'm looking into my little screen I notice I'm appearing rather small and everything else is large behind me, but that's okay. That way I got room, I can move my arms around and you can look around and see what kind of books I've got on this set of shelves. Anyway, I got some really cool things I want to talk about, and the first thing I want to mention is I'm doing a second read of a book that was written by Bernal Diaz, who was one of the soldiers. Sometimes he refers to himself as a captain, but one of the people that went to conquer New Spain. And in fact, it's called The Conquest of New Spain, Bernal Diaz. And he made a very interesting observation in here, which I haven't researched any further, but knowing something about things that Cicero and Seneca have said about the international parasite, or the entity, as I like to refer to them as well. They had not very positive things to say about the entity, and indeed, according to Bernal Diaz, the Emperor Vespasian booted them out. And it seems that they may very likely have gone west. Now you do realize that the Romans had ships large enough to traverse the Atlantic Ocean, and in fact did so, even the Phoenicians before them. And of course we know that the Phoenicians, the ancient Canaanites and so on, that they are one of the root groups, if you will, of what now constitutes the international parasite. But anyway, they went west. And according to Bernal Diaz, there were some sculptures, idols, or some sort of effigies perhaps, in gold, and maybe silver too, that looked to him like they might have been the work of Jews, not of the Indians, of the natives of that area, Mexico and Mesoamerica. And so that's very curious. That's a very interesting thought, that it is possible so many years ago that the entity set foothold in North America, and may indeed be the reason why eventually those Indians, the Azteca, for example, the Mayans, you know, they resorted to really horrific, barbaric ceremonies, ripping the beating heart out of a victim, for example. Well, knowing quite a bit about the international parasite and what it has done and what it is up to. Indeed, this entire COVID is one of the things that the entity is up to. That they may very well have been the reason those natives evolved those barbaric practices, though indeed those Romanized Judaic entities may have come there with, you know, a much more superior perhaps technology and maybe some magic that was something they could easily use to persuade the Indians, or maybe they were very cruel to begin with and chopped a few up in front of the others, and then eventually, as you know, that's what tends to happen, and that is how politicians tend to achieve, you know, their level of status, is because they have the machinery of the state that they can rely on to chop people up, maybe not literally, but certainly figuratively. And indeed the machinations of the government pertaining to the COVID nonsense in the United States has now resulted in a suicide death of a veteran and of a very capable and able man whose entire life was ruined. And indeed, he was being prosecuted for things that really he should not have been prosecuted for. I don't know the exact details, but at any rate, he was driven to such desperation that he just committed suicide here a day or two ago. Very tragic reflection on what's going on. But anyway, so if you haven't read this, the Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz, it is a recommended reading because there are some other very interesting observations in here, and I will talk about those in another episode. Since we are in the middle of a COVID and everybody is basically duped into thinking that wearing one of these things over one's face somehow protects one from what amounts to be an invisible boogeyman. Virus theory is nonsense, germ theory is absolute hogwash, but that's what the modern medical paradigm is basically founded on, and that is why we have the pharmaceutical industry, because people have bought into the virus and germ theories. And so now we need all these chemicals, to combat these issues. But this here is, I'm actually going to try it, because I'm thinking this might actually be a pretty good coffee filter. And I don't know if there's any kind of flavoring that might compromise the taste of the coffee, but at any rate, water goes right through this, and so does if you use a spray can. You can spray in there, and you'll see spray come out of there. So that's really not going to stop much if you actually had something that you were coughing out that could cause somebody else to fall dead. Of course, again, the whole thing's nonsense. But this one I saved. Oh, it's backwards there. Yeah, this one I saved because it was given to me very kindly at a local Jewish establishment called Walmart. And Walmart is basically the reason, or actually the reason for Walmart is that we were all duped into thinking that we should turn everything over to China to produce, and in the meantime, tax the citizens to death. And so they have no choice but to go to a Jewish enterprise that sells Chinese-made goods really cheaply, because we can't afford to buy things that are made locally because they're too expensive, because the workers are receiving a wage that is commensurate with the environment they live in. Canada, Alberta, these are not cheap places. This is not a cheap place to live. And if you're not making decent moolah, you don't live all that well in these places, unless, of course, you're a Muslim immigrant claiming to be a refugee, or you're a Negro. Lots of Negroes are walking around here, coming from places like Somalia, where the average IQ is 60. It's great that we bring them into our community. I reminded City Council of that, by the way. I'm not afraid that people call me a racist, because I freely admit it. I am a racist. I am totally pro-white. Indeed, I'm a white supremacist. I'm not afraid to say that either. What's wrong with that? Just because you Jews think there's something wrong with that, and you've got everybody else thinking there's something wrong with that? I want to live in a white-only nation where only people are allowed in that are extremely vetted first, and not particularly made welcome if they are coming from, say, Negro land, and members of the Black Lives Matter communist thugs group. Burn, loot, burn, loot, murder, that's it. Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan. And I've told City Council that allowing Muslims here, they're setting us up for something really diabolical in the not too distant future. But anyway, getting back to this little coffee filter, and they gave it to me at Wally's Mart. So I put it on my head. I walked around with it like this for a while. And then my son said, "Oh, that looks silly." So then I walked around with it hanging from my ear. But I was the only one in the entire store that walked around and basically showing the cameras what a pile of nonsense this whole story is, and I'm not about to comply. And that's the reason why I'm not shopping at the El Canadian Superstore now, because they've made masks mandatory when you want to shop there. And so a store which I've been shopping at pretty much since it got here in Red Deer, I know a lot of the tellers that work there. I'm not setting foot in that store, absolutely not. So I have to shop elsewhere. It's costing me a bit more, but so be it. If you're not a person of principle, then really you're not really a fully human being either. And that's kind of like what police are. They're not human. They are robots, they're automatons, they're order takers. They've totally set aside their conscience and will perform totally immoral acts, as we are seeing now going on in Australia and in the state of Victoria in particular. If you've been paying attention, the draconian measures that the Jew has planned for all of us is being played out in Australia. And so pay attention to that. And again, I repeat, make your voice heard. Do not accept the dictates of politicians who are basically narcissistic, self-serving traitors. And they all should be prosecuted as such. Indeed, City Council is well aware of my position on that here. And I have had a meeting already with one of the councilmen. They sent the ex-RCMP at me. I have to laugh. I did remind them also that as of October 1st, they can indeed be all individually arrested and charged with a criminal felony for promoting the wearing of masks on our public transportation system. The buses, you have to wear a mask now to get on the bus, and they're making the drivers wear those things. And City Council is also fluoridating our drinking water here. They've done so since 1957, and since that is now a classified weapons-grade neurotoxin, City Council has been reminded more than once that they are indeed war criminals. And that's what you should all be doing. Is don't just sit on your hands. Use them on a keyboard and send an email off to your City Council and your individual councillors. You know, government starts at the local level. And all that stuff going on at the federal level. Well, my good Lord Almighty, you know, we look at what's going on in Ottawa, for example. I mean, look at what we have for a crime minister. You know, the spawn of Fidel Castro and a Jewish whore. Yeah, great. That's our sly minister. The guy's about as bright as a peanut. I don't mean to denigrate peanuts, but they're not conscious, so it doesn't matter. And I don't think Justin Trudeau is all that conscious either. Stands there with that big black coffee filter over his face. What a frickin' moron. We here in Alberta laugh. And in fact, there was a t-shirt printed that showed a noose on the front. And it's "Come West, Trudeau." Yeah. That's really people. You've got to start pushing the idea of rope therapy for these people. They got to be held accountable. And that's the problem, is that they've always gotten away with it. They've always gotten away with it because we don't hold these criminals to account. We vote them in, they do a term or two, and then they go away. Or in the case, let's say Obama there, the Muslim homosexual in Washington, D.C., how come he still has a voice, and how come the press is still picking up? That guy should have been arrested on the very first day that he was into that office. And then to give him a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, of course, that august prize was already compromised when they gave it to Henry Kissinger. And so that was basically at the death of the Nobel Peace Prize thing for me then already. But as of the 1st of October, according to a public proclamation that came out of a common law court in BC, in Parksville, it is now the law. So here is the preamble to it. It's a notice of public safety bylaw, abolishing and outlawing COVID restrictions, mandatory vaccinations, and other unlawful, unhealthy, and unwarranted measures in our community, issued by the Oceanside Common Law Assembly on Monday, August 24, 2020. Let it be known that the regulations in Canada that restrict free movement and association, impose mandatory quarantines, distancing, medical testing, and vaccinations, and require the wearing of masks are unlawful, unwarranted, and medically unsound measures that threaten and assault the fundamental liberties, health, and security of the people of our community, and violate the internationally recognized legal right of free and informed consent that governs all medical procedures, and that comes out of the Nuremberg Code from 1947. And so it is ordered that what's going to end up happening is that all the people that assume jurisdiction and impose these draconian restrictions in that part of BC can be rounded up, arrested, charged with a criminal felony, and fined extremely heavily and even face a jail sentence, which I think is brilliant. And this is coming to all of Canada, and so I did remind City Council of that as well, that on October 1st they can risk being imprisoned even. And so I will be pushing a bit further with that and seeing if I can discuss matters with a common law sheriff here in the near future, and then we'll see how we proceed. City Council has been warned, and so it is, they cannot back out and say, oh, we didn't know about, the dangers of hexafluorosilicic acid, or we didn't know about any of this stuff. They do know, because I've informed them, not just verbally, but in writing. And one of the things I gave Mr. Buchanan, the councillor I met with, was this, of which I've sold well over 650 copies. A handbook for the righteous, or how to beat the unrighteous at their own game. I wrote this in basically a reaction to my experiences in court up to the provincial court level, my 5th appearance. And I learned about the difference between admiralty law and common law. And I did my homework. And in an empty courtroom, I beat, $15,000 or so in fines and fees and a possible 60-day jail sentence. Because I stood up for myself, and they resolved the issue in an empty courtroom, and the whole thing was off the record. I've sold these booklets. Generally, they sell for $50, and there's just over 50 pages. I've added an addendum to it, so there's some new stuff in here. But it's over 50 pages, essentially an essay in the history and philosophy of law, and clearly shows you what is the difference between common law and the law that you're ruled under, which is admiralty law with an adjunct Noahide law. Which is the Jewish law for Gentiles, for Goyim, animals in human skin. That's what they think of us. And as you well know, many, many Jews slither about in the court systems as judges and prosecutors and lawyers, and they make a very big killing off us because for most of us, we don't know any better, and we just simply trust. But you have to understand this and overstand this, that the assumption of jurisdiction is an absolute fraud. We are sovereign beings with no one over us but God, and anyone assuming jurisdiction, a queen, a king, a judge, they are liars. They're lying through their teeth, and they're just hoping, praying that you don't realize it and that you don't do anything contrary and go along with it, sign the contract, and basically sign a good part of your life away. Courts, by and large, are extortion rackets, and the police are they're basically the trolls that troll around to generate business, and they generate business for the court, and the judge gets 30% of the day's take right into his pension or her pension fund. Then you think, like for those of you who live in the United States, you have a creature that is running for a position as vice president next to a very sorry case of dementia, a walking broccoli named Joe Biden. Really, he should be in a rest home. And Kamala Harris was a prosecutor with a horrific record of imposing heavy penalties on pot smokers, for example. If I was living in California, I probably would have been arrested when she was, the creature there in charge. These people are monsters. These people are criminals. And again, I repeat, their imposition of jurisdiction is a fraud. and you can't go along with that. So don't. Just remember that what you are engaged in the courts is a very dark game, and it's mostly ruled by Jews, and they are told by their law, the Talmud, that it's okay to lie, cheat, steal, and kill, as long as it's Goyim that are getting the stick. Anyway, you can acquire this booklet if you wish. I have received as much as $145 for this, but all I'm asking is $50. It does help me with my work, and it helps keep me alive once in a while if I do get a sale. That definitely helps a lot, since costs have definitely gone up. But you know, I'm not begging. I'm not saying send me money just to support me. No, I've got a really fabulous little booklet here that you will find extremely helpful. Doesn't matter what country you live in. I mean, there's the fundamental issue here is... I ran out of time on my thing there, so anyway, back to this. The fundamental issue is that law, according to Frederick Bastiat, for example, which has he wrote a marvelous little book called The Law. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I used quite a bit of his thinking in putting this together, but this is a bit more extrapolated, and there's a little bit more down the rabbit hole kind of digressions in here that make this a very interesting read. And so if you wish to acquire this, all you need to do is you can email me at gertjan@shaw.ca, and I'll put the information there below. And you can ask for the booklet, and then I will send you the information regarding how to get the funds to me. PayPal cut me off last January, and that was after I did a radio program with Graham Hart and Bryzer out of Cornwall, Revolution Radio. I think it was on Eurofolk actually, and that was on December 31st. And we had some very excellent guests as well, including myself, I guess. I think I'm pretty excellent. And and Monica Schaefer was on, and she's amazing and excellent. And I don't recall who else was. I think John Kaminsky was supposed to come on, but unfortunately he had some technical issues. But he's most excellent. And gosh, there's some excellent people that are making videos and speaking truth and hammering at the enemy. And you know, Monica Schaefer being one, and poor old Alfred, her brother, is still in jail. He's been moved to a different location, so I had sent him a nice thick letter, but it came back. So the entity doesn't even forward, you know, a political prisoner's mail. That's what a bunch of cockroaches they've got there in Germany. It's a wonder to me that those people are still breathing, quite frankly. You know, Angela Merkel, the antithesis of Adolf Hitler, the exact absolute antithesis of a man who cared for his people and his nation. And here we have this lesbian communist cunt that is the sly minister of Germany, the Chancellor of Germany. She's destroying that country, and the people are letting her do it. Nobody's taken a pot shot at her yet. That I find quite remarkable. But it's coming. I think that the level of anger and the awakening is coming on really fast. And that's why the entity is scrambling and struggling so hard to try and put a lid on this. But it's not going to happen. We outnumber them. We're way smarter than they are. The only problem is we're not as well organized. And that is our downfall. As a race, we white people, all we're interested in is like building a paradise for ourselves and our children and grandchildren. We're done with wars, all of that nonsense a long time ago. If it wasn't for the entity sticking its tentacles in all the time, that's why we have all these problems. That's why we have all these wars. Millions and millions of us have been murdered by the entity. Isn't it time that we start paying them back? I think it's way past the time that the entity is sent back to the hell it came from. Indeed, some rabbis point to the sky and say, we came from out there. So they are admitting they're not human, They're an alien infestation, and their days now have to be numbered. The lines are drawn in granite. They're in basalt. They're drawn in diamonds, the hardest material apparently. The lines are drawn. We cannot go back anymore. And now it is time to, buck up, folks. Straighten your backs. Grab your cojones. Make sure that you're well armed and that you know how to use that equipment. It's time to go hunting. Yes. Okay, so get this book. I'm setting up because PayPal, like I said, they banned me after that radio program because I speak plainly, such as I do, and they figured, well, that somehow circumvented or somehow went outside of their parameters, their the parameters to protect the snowflakes and to keep a lid on the boiling pot that Jew doesn't want to blow up on him. And of course that is going to happen regardless of how much they ban us here and there in JewTube, or even BitChute now is becoming compromised apparently, and I've had a few issues. And my goodness, loading up one of my videos into BitChute takes pretty much a day. Whereas with Libry, LBRY, which is also a wonderful platform, and Sarah Koraher, the Crusader gal, she has a regular presentation in Libry, and I highly recommend watch Sarah. She's a good talker. She's really smart and entertaining, and she doesn't hedge. She doesn't hold back. She tells it like she sees it. Albeit she's young and she still doesn't quite know the true story of National Socialism in Germany during the Second Jewish World War and all that. As so many public speakers, they don't really have a clue about that part of the history. But Jim Rizzoli, he knows, and Diane King, she knows, those two. Big shout out to Jim Rizzoli and Diane King, two people whom I love very much because of the great work that they're doing. And of course Brian Rue in Vancouver, in a very gentle way, but still keeps at it regardless of the criticism. He's a National Socialist, and he's not afraid to speak the truth. But like I say, he does it in a gentle manner. He's in Vancouver. Oh, and I did mention Polly St. George. I think she's in Ontario somewhere. I think in maybe St. Catharines possibly. But also a brilliant presenter, and but again, these people, all of them are well, with the exception of Brian Rue and Jim and Diane, but many people who do present, the truth, say, are a little bit afraid to go across the bridge and actually mention the entity. It kind of circumvent around that. Some people will say, for example, oh yeah, I have Jewish friends, or that sort of thing, or yes, I have Negro friends, white person, they have Negro friends. Yeah, well, I don't know. My friends, they all tend to be people with IQs that are off into the stratosphere, and I don't see myself being overly interested in being friends with other than maybe on a kind of a pet level, as I have my cats are my friends. But it's really important that you seek out high-minded, brilliant people to be with and to listen to. But be careful about those subtle speakers. They slip it in so subtly, even in books and wherever. The Holocaust is brought up somehow out of whatever weird context, what the Holocaust is, or you're reading a book on Islam, and then you, by say the writer Scheinlein, same last name as Judge Judy, Judge Judy. Oh my good Lord, she for a time was the highest paid television entertainer, was Judge Judy. People would just eat that up, watching her, that Jewish creature, beat up on people in a courtroom. Oh my God, it's so, what a circus. But they control the media, so obviously a Jew gets to be the judge and gets to make $60 million a year doing that on TV. Yeah. What a story. Where was I going? I was going to talk. Oh yeah. No, I'm off track now, and I probably talked enough as it is anyway. You guys have probably now thought, oh, this guy just yaps away, yap, and we've heard enough, and so okay, I think that's enough. We'll keep these videos a little bit shorter than the inaugural one. This is episode 2, and I'm Gert-Jan Zwigelaar, signing off. Thank you so much for watching. And again, remember, you can obtain this book. Just email me at gertjan@shaw.ca. And Skrill, I believe, is the new PayPal alternative that I'm going to be working with. So I do have an account set up with Skrill. I haven't put any money in it as yet, but you can certainly do that. So, $50 for something that if you use this information, you'll never hire a lawyer. Why would you? The information's all in here. That's all you really need. And of course, a good brain. And maybe you do a little bit further research, but that is not a problem, because in this booklet is a 2-page bibliography with a whole bunch of books that will take you completely through the matrix to the other side. I mean, that's why this is in a red cover, because this is the red pill, and that's what a lot of my readers have called it. This is the red pill. So, gertjan@shaw.ca. Thanks a lot for watching, and until next time, I will just go on and do something else till I come up with another idea to talk to you about. There's so much actually to talk about. So anyway, thanks again.